Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we've got another TT-02 that I'm going to build up. My hopes is to have two of these built up. One for the 27.5 turn class that they've started doing at Eckington, and one running the 20 turn motor that we're allowed to run at Kilmarsh. But we'll have to see how this plays out. But I'm going to build this one up, and we've got a whole bunch of different mods that we should be allowed to run. So it says we can run any chassis mods at all if it's going to be the 27.5 turn motor one. So we're going to build this up, and this time I'm going to start with one of the drift spec cars. These do come with sports tune motor, they come with drift tyres which I'll not be using, and they come with the CVA shocks and soft springs, but we have got a whole bunch of mods for it, including a full carbon chassis conversion. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. I will be doing the R34 body, but that's not what I'm going to be using for racing. So although I will be building that up at some point, it's not the shell because they're far too nice to trash racing. And I kind of wish I'd not destroyed my CNHL racing, because the cheap Chinese body shells from AliExpress, they're just far better suited to racing. You can beat the hell out of them, and they're like 13 quid, where this has got all the light buckets and everything, and it's a lot nicer shell. Don't really want to wreck this. So let's bring you in for a close-up look, and we'll crack on with build. Right, so straight away, we're not going to be following your stock instructions. So we're using the high-speed gear set. So this is the OP1500, and you just need to line that up on the back of the high-speed spur gear with the little holes, and then we just need to carefully screw these in. So what I'm going to do is get these started, and then it makes it easier to line it up. You're not going to want to go crazy tight with these, because you've only got a plastic spur gear and you're only screwing into aluminium, so it's not something that you need to go absolutely mentally tight on. But we get these in, and then you just want to nip them up, and this is an awful lot easier if you're using these JIS screwdrivers. So once we've got that into place, we're going to get us bearing. And the one of the advantages of this kit is that it does actually come with full bearings, or I believe it's a full set of bearings. Then we're using the TT-02 016BU, and we're using this part instead of the stock Tamiya part. And then we want the little sleeve on. Then you've got the tiny drive pin, so we need to get that through. Then you want to line your high-speed spur gear up and just give it a push, make sure it's sat all the way down in there. Then we're going to close it off with another bearing, and then you want your actual drive gear. Then you should have this tiny little O-ring, and this is just basically going to be a cushion for the end at drive shaft. So we just want to get that sat down snugly inside, and that's basically what we should be looking at. Your little spacer in between, bearing either side, screws facing forward, and that's your first part all assembled. Right, let's see what's next. So for our next part, we've got the opposite end for the Racing output shafts. And we're just going to put that little O-ring, just get it nice and level in the bottom. Push it down with your drive shaft, so you've got the O-ring sat right in the bottom of there. Then we have the Racing drive shaft, so that's going to sit like that. And then we're going to have two of these bearings, and there's nothing sits in between them, and basically that's what we should end up with. So we've got as high speed gear, the Racing output shafts, Racing drive shaft, and the stock Tamiya gears on either end, and depend on whether you buy the drift kit, which comes with all the bearings, or you'll have to supply your own bearings for it. The part number for the drive shaft is TT-02 014BU. So that's all the kit we're using so far. But let's get on to the next bit, see what else we've got for you. Right, so this is the carbon chassis kit we're going to be using. So we got two of these alloy housings, and we're going to flip the chassis upside down, and we're going to want both these facing inwards. So we should be able to line this up, and then it's just going to be a case of get a whole load of thread lock and all these little screws. So these are going to be the countersunk head ones. So every one of these is going to want a bit of thread lock on them, because they're going into alloy and they'll fall out if you don't. So once we've got the thread lock on them, we're going to have to get, I believe these are 2mm heads, but I'll just check. Yep, so these are all 2mm heads, and we're going to want to screw every one of these in. What I would do is, first off, just get them started until you've got all of them in. So there should be 5 for each side. So I'll show you where they go on the on this side, and then you should be able to follow it on the other side. So these do come with instructions, but the certainly the instructions I've got could be a little clearer. So basically we want to repeat that on this side, so I'll get them screwed in. So once you've got all these tightened down, don't go crazy with these two center ones, because there is a slight gap between the chassis and the threads, but you should have 5 screws in either side. Once we've got that done, that is the base of your chassis assembled, and you should have a whole bunch of the button head screws left there to fasten the components to the top of these aluminium housings, so put them to one side, and let's see what else it's got in store for us. So next thing we're going to assemble is the bumper, and they do give you 2 of these with this kit. Not sure if it's in case you break one, but you've got the countersunk holes at the bottom. So we're going to need 4 of these screws, and you're going to want a bit of thread lock on them, and we're going to pop these in, and then you should be able to screw these posts in, and you don't need to go crazy tight because your thread lock's going to grab them. But basically these are going to make your retainer for your foam bumper, I believe. It looks like the spacing's the same as the stock one, but obviously this is then in aluminium and carbon. And to be totally honest, the instructions aren't too bad. I've certainly had worse instructions with stuff. But as you can see, this is shaping up to be a very different TT-02. Next thing, we're going to need to flip this over, and then you've got to flip your bumper over, and your bumper's going to be fitting underneath the chassis itself. So it looks like we're going for that orientation. Then you're going to need 3 of the countersunk screws. So we're going to want to get these in place, and then you should be able to slide your bumper over the actual screws. And then it's going to be a bit of a fun part, because we've got to kind of try and hold all these in place. So you might find it easier to do these one at a time, but I'm just trying to do it the best way I can show you on video. And then you've got 3 of these little lock nuts. That's also why these don't need any thread lock on them. So you get them in place, and then put your 3 bolts in and just tighten them down. So we'll get that done and see what else we've got. So again, tiny bit of thread lock, and we're going to pass these through from the back of the chassis. And once we got them in place, you're then going to need to get one of your aluminium posts, and we're going to screw that on. And I believe these are going to be making up part of the steering rack. So that's going to be in one of the outermost holes, and then we're going for the outermost hole on the opposite side of the chassis, and then that's got them in place. And then we just need to put all the rest of these little screws to one side because they're going to hold the steering on when it gets round to getting to that point. So let's see what else we've got. So moving on, rather than use the motor mount that comes with kit, we're going to use the Wtf Rc TT-02 013BU. So this does fit on the part that comes with this kit absolutely perfect. So that's going to screw down nice and tight to it. And then we're going to be mounting this to the rear of the chassis. So if we look, we've got 3 holes. They should line up with all them 3. So hopefully this will go together how it should. But we're then going to have to get 3 of the tapered head screws. So we're going to want a bit of thread lock on each one of these. So I believe the shortest one is for the actual bracket itself, and then the 2 longer ones are the ones that go all the way through into a motor mount. So it does look like, again, these are going to work really well with the Wtf Rc fully adjustable motor mount. There's nothing wrong with the mount that comes with this chassis, it's just not completely adjustable, whereas the Wtf Rc one gives us complete adjustability. Then we've got this piece that we're going to put these 2 screws through. So these are the 2 domed headed screws that come with this kit, and we're going to need to get a bit of thread lock. So I'll just pinch a bit off at table because they're going to go in and hold as drive shaft bearings. So let's see what else we've got. So the next thing we're going to do is get this little bit fitted. So again, we're just going to want a bit of thread lock on each one of these screws. So once we've got us thread lock, you're then going to want to get one of these screws, and they're going to come up from underneath the chassis, and then we're going to fix this or as bearing carrier. That's going to want to screw down facing backwards, and this just goes in the 2 center screw holes. So once we've got that in place, you've then got a sort of a center chassis brace, and that's going to run down the middle of the RC, and then you've got a screw that just goes in from either side. So again, tiny little bit of thread lock on these, and these are the little button head screws, and we're going to want one that screws in from the back, and then we're going to get this one fastened in from the front, and this should give the give a bit of structure to the carbon chassis. And as you can see, starting to take shape now. We've got a few little button head screws left, and they're going to be to fasten the tops on these. We've got this little bit what will hold the drive shaft in, but let's see what else we've got. So first thing we're going to need on this step, we've got to get these little posts fastened in. So we're going to go from the bottom of the chassis, and we're going to want 2 of these posts on the front and rear. So we get 1 in, and again these are all into aluminium, so we're going to need thread lock on them. So we'll just get these nipped up. Then again, I'm going to do exactly the same, but on the rear. And this is definitely a good bit more involved than building a stock TT-02 chassis, because we'd already be a good number of steps into the build by now, and at the minute we're still assembling a chassis, although it does look a whole lot nicer than a stock TT-02. But that's the sort of positioning that you want to be looking at. So you want to be looking at that offset position. Now if you look at this and the rear one, you can see that they're staggered, and the rear one is going to screw in that way, this one is going to screw in that way. So longer arm to outside on the front, longer arm to inside on rear, and the front one is adjustable, so you can alter this to suit whatever batteries you want. Now, before we mount these on, we're going to have to mount these two posts on the top, and you do these to match your actual battery holes. And it does say the furthest out are for NIM and the furthest in are for LiPo hard packs, but I would advise before you put these in, get your battery that you want to be running it off and then see which position lines up best for you. So let's get that checked and see what we need. Right, so depending which position you want, if you're using the rear positions to close the gap down, you need to use the furthest back position for the post as well. And I believe this is what your battery retention bracket's going to go down on. So you put that on the furthest back, and then we're going to need these two on the furthest hole back. So for the batteries I'm going to be running, they shouldn't need too big of an opening, so they should get away with the smallest. And then when you're building the rear one, you can just line these up because these holes are all the same. So we just need to get that into position. And then we can screw down the battery holder. And I'm guessing, like all the Tamiyas, the Z packs will probably go in these really easy. And I think the Gens Ace are probably going to be a pain. I don't know why Gens Ace don't bring the battery wires out central and stagger them that way rather than that way. But it's kind of what they do. But we should be able to get that held in. And then when we put the sort of battery bar on the top, you should just be able to screw it down with these thumb screws, and that should give you plenty of room to hold your battery down. So now we've got it built to this point, we don't need the battery yet. So that is basically your carbon chassis all made. It's got a nice bit of flex in it, but not too much. So let's crack on and see what else we need. So we should be able to line our drive shaft and his bearings up. So let's see how easy it is to get these things in. So they go in and they go in. So that's quite a nice tight fit. Then you're going to need the D2 part that comes with your original kit, but we're going to fasten this on with two of the button screws that come with the chassis kit itself and not the Tamiya kit. And you're going to want a little bit of thread lock on each of these because it's going into aluminium, and you don't need to tighten them down a crazy amount. Then we're going to need this, and this is going to sit on the back. I'm going to need the MIP ball driver, I think, to get this on. So basically all this is the sort of the half that closes the bearing carrier up. Let's see if we can get that to sit down perfectly flat before I tighten it up. That's better. So just make sure your bearing is sat all the way down in the bearing case before you start tightening this up. And you can spin it, make sure it's not over tight on the bearing, but it should be nice and free, but it should hold it really solid, because that's going to stop your pinion gear and spur separating. But basically that cap and that little cap screwed down, and that holds his drive shaft in place, and as you can see it's really free. There's no extra tension on it or anything. So let's see what else we've got. Next it's asking us to get some grease on these. So depending on how you want to run it, depends on entirely what sort of grease you want to use on these. There is the hoodie grease, you've got the Tamiya ceramic grease, which I think that's what I'm going to go with on this one because it seems to work quite well on me other Tamiya RCs. So you just want to get a good bit of grease on it and it'll work its way around everywhere anyway. And it is curious, it does actually tell you to do the spur, but I'm not going to put loads on it on because it's just going to fire off and go everywhere because we're not running a cover on this one. Right, so that's all the grease in place, and I think this is as good a place to end this video because I don't want them being too long. I'd rather split it up and make them nice and short or shorter. So let's wrap this one up. There we have it. We have a TT-02 with a difference. We're using a lot of racing parts, carbon chassis, and it's going to be a different one. This should be nice and interesting, something a bit different, but hopefully it'll be useful to somebody or you might enjoy it. But thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.